Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Scottish Greens live chat. I'm Lorna Slater, one of the co-leaders of the Scottish Green Party, and today I'll be talking with some of our Scottish youth climate strikers, who I'll introduce or get them to introduce themselves just now. Dylan, can you introduce yourself, please?
So I'm Dylan. I am 15 years old and I strike in Edinburgh, but sometimes in Glasgow, and I'm from Linlithgow, so yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Holly, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Holly Gillibrand. I'm 14 years old and I strike in Fort William.
Brilliant, thank you. And Josie, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, I'm Josie Law. I'm 15 and I tend to strike in Edinburgh.
Thank you guys so much for joining me for this live chat today. So we're all dialing in from different parts of Scotland because, of course, we're all in quarantine. And just before we went live, we were chatting about our different experiences of lockdown. And I was saying that I don't even like going out for my daily walks because it's too crowded on the pavement. People come too close to you and it just feels really stressful. What have your guys' experience been like? Josie?
I've found the whole quarantine, I find it really nerve-wracking going outside, but I have to because I'm not going to let my mum go out and carry all the shopping back by herself. And because my dad got sick at the start of quarantine, I've had to compensate and help her so she continues supporting us. But a lot of people pay attention to the guidelines, but not everyone does. So I find it really stressful making sure I have to cross the road every 5 minutes because people aren't stepping to the side. And I've just found the whole experience really stressful on me and my family as well.
Dylan, what's been your experience?
The shops have been extremely stressful just because there's been people who've come within like 2 feet of me, which is definitely unsafe. And there's way too many people in the shops at a time, and it's so stressful. But apart from that, it's kind of been okay because I can get out of the town quite easily. So I've been able to go around like some fields and see all the sheep and alpacas in them. But yeah, that's kind of been okay. But apart from that, yeah, it's been really stressful. A lot of people are not following the rules. Like my mum was the only person in the supermarket wearing a mask the other day. So it'd be nice if people could follow them a bit more than they already are.
Holly, how are things where you are up near Fort William?
So it sounds very different to Dylan and Josie's because I live just outside of Fort William. So the only people I've actually seen in 2 months is our close neighbors. So that's maybe 4 or 5 people. And I haven't been into Fort William for ages, and it's actually quite easy around here to get out for walks because we'll have several hills out the back of our garden, so you can just go over the fence and walk for ages. But it's been okay. It's been nice to be able to get out more often than I was doing, actually, even though we're only walking about once a day. But it's been less stressful by the sounds of it than Josie and Dylan's experiences.
Josie and Dylan, what do you think about these ideas around space for distancing? Because I know I would find it a lot less stressful if we didn't have cars parked along every street and we had some cones so we could widen the space for people who are walking and wheeling, and then a separate place for bikes as well. Because I have noticed that more people are cycling now that there's fewer cars on the roads. What might that look like near you guys? Dylan?
I would like more cycle lanes, but I haven't noticed cars being a problem necessarily, just because there's less of them going onto anywhere I would be going and parking on the pavement. So it's kind of been all right-ish, but I think it could definitely be a problem in a city. But bike lanes would be really, really good because you either have to go on the pavement and risk going really close to people, or the road where people are driving more unsafe than they were before, and that's quite stressful. But yeah, it would be good to have more bike lanes separate from that so that people could distance properly.
Josie?
Well, I live on a really busy road anyway, so I found that once quarantine began, the road was a lot quieter, but it was still quite busy. So people haven't really been able to distance properly because it's not like they can just go onto the road for a bit to let someone pass. So you either have to cross the road or let no one pass at all. And because there's been more bikes on the road and the pavement, it's made it a lot more difficult. So as Dylan said, bike lanes would be a big plus, because young children especially, and with their parents, have been going out, and like when they go on the pavement, there's nowhere for you to go, because you can't go onto the road because there's loads of cars going past still during quarantine, but you can't stay on the pavement either, because then you go within the 2-meter radius. It's, yeah.
I think you've described really well what kind of changes that we really need in cities and probably in towns as well, Holly. What do you think would be helpful in Fort William so that people can keep space for distancing?
So lots more cycle paths, like room for cycling, because we only have really one major road going through Fort William, and I haven't actually seen it, but I'm sure it's still difficult to like keep with it apart 2 meters because of the smallness of the pavements. And yeah, we just need to make room for people on roads and for cyclists as well, and allow people to stay apart, and as well as getting their exercise. I mean, the road, we've got a really busy road down by our house, and I didn't used to cycle on it because I just didn't feel safe, because the cars were just going so fast and there were so many of them. But now I can cycle for ages without like seeing a single car. So things have improved a lot, but I think we still need to be able to make more room for cyclists and for people on roads, because I mean, cars, like, it's so hard to social distance when you've only got a 2-meter strip of pavement.
So something that as Greens we're hoping will happen is that we don't think that it's safe or sensible or even desirable to go back to normal. Our old normal was not only destroying the planet, it was putting a lot of people under stress, commuting to jobs which they can clearly do from home, especially disabled people and stuff. We used to hear in the past, oh, we couldn't possibly make that job work from homeable, but suddenly, oh, look, everyone can work from home, when they have an office type job. This was always possible. It just wasn't possible when disabled people needed it, but suddenly now it's possible. And I think things like that, along with space for distancing in cities and towns, I think means that there is an opportunity here that we don't have to return to the old normal. We can move forward into something better. And that something is also greener. There's no need to, as some people say, chuck out this green stuff. We need to fight to get back to normal. What we're saying is we can do better than that. We can return to a functioning economy, but it's better than things used to be, where cycling is safer, where there's more room on pavement, so people who are in a wheelchair maybe aren't trying to get around a car that's parked on the pavement, where you have room for kids to play in the streets, so they're not going to get knocked down by cars. And something that's a really big problem in the centre of Edinburgh is the air quality. It's so polluted in the centre of Edinburgh that I often walk to my office before quarantine, and I would prefer to do it on rainy days, because that air was a bit clearer on those days. We have a terrible problem, and I think there are some huge opportunities in dealing with coronavirus, because it's going to be something we're going to have to live with now for quite a long time. But we need to find ways to open up our economy, and things like space for distancing tackle both of those issues. They tackle our climate and quality of life issues, as well as making things safer around coronavirus. Do any of you have some ideas for other things that are both good for helping us handle coronavirus and good for the environment?
I have one.
I think it was Josie.
Oh, okay. I have one point on the air pollution is horrible on the road I live on a day-to-day basis. And since quarantines began, there has been a huge improvement that it's been noticeable. Like, I've been going outside and been like, oh, this is actually nice to experience rather than, so I think there should be a definite change to that, whether it's encouraging public transport, encouraging people to like get electric cars, different things, or cycle to work more. I think it needs to change, and I think quarantine is only highlighting it and saying this is a point, why has no one addressed this? And I think that quarantine is like saying that you need to change this now. Why are we going to go back to something that was clearly wrong?
I agree. Dylan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, most of kind of what I've noticed has been around being disabled for me. So like one time in the last entire year of school, I managed to do 3 whole days in a row. I did crash after it, but I did it. And in the first week of online school, I've managed to do 3 in a row, no problem. So it's kind of like I've been fighting to get online school since I was about 11, because that's when I started feeling actually sick. And now it's all available, and it's really hard to know that it's going to go as soon as this is done. And I wish people would kind of listen more to the ways we can change when going back to normal. But it's hard to have that hope because they've never really listened before. But yeah.
That sounds really hard. What do you think that they'll take that away from you? Is there any indication of that, or is this moving forward into a new and better normal where you have access remotely?
I mean, a lot of it's just because teachers have so much work to do. So now they're having to put everything online. And if it was made easier, for them to put it online for me to see at home and do myself, I would feel a lot less pressure to come in. But they also are really busy. So if they're not actually required to do it, they probably won't put it online. But yeah.
It's a good example, though, of how asking people to do things voluntarily that they perceive as difficult or extra work means that they simply don't happen. You see this over and over again with government. They refuse, Tory governments refuse to regulate for things. And they say, well, we'll just ask nicely for corporations to do these things. And they go, no, why do we do that? But that's where government comes in. It's so important. Holly, has all this move to remote access made it easier as someone who lives in a rural area? Has it made it easier for you to participate in events?
I think definitely. I've taken part in like a couple of online events where I've been speaking, and to not have the pressure of driving to all these different places that are so far away from Fort William has made it so much easier to speak at them and to take part in them. And I think that is definitely something we need to keep doing after lockdown, because there are so many events and conferences that happen that are really unnecessary and that they could happen online, and you can get just as much done at home, like looking at your computer, than driving all the way somewhere else to do the same thing. So that is, it's definitely made it easier for me to be able to get work done and to take part in these sorts of things.
And I think we're all very lucky because, we've all learned a lot more about using technology. We've all become proficient in GoToMeeting and Zoom and all the different platforms that are available. And of course, you guys are young and grew up with technology. I think a lot of older people do struggle with the technology, though. And I go to some amusing Zoom meetings. There's always someone who's upside down or sideways, or who can't figure out how to mute their microphone. It's always hilarious. But you guys, like, young people are good at this stuff, right? You guys, do you have hilarious Zoom meetings, or do they all go okay?
I have quite hilarious meetings often with my teachers, because they don't, often they'll find the platform difficult to use, because though there's ways to find out how to use it, it's often not very user friendly to begin with. So they find it quite difficult to get their head around it to start with, and then we'll end up having to sit on a call for 15 minutes trying to make the audio work and trying to be able to hear each other. And it can get quite chaotic to begin with, but slowly but surely it's being pieced together, I feel.
Anyone else got any good Zoom disasters?
Well, our teachers haven't actually been using Zoom calls with us. Not sure why, but they just so obviously we do stuff usually through presentations and just online classwork, but they've tried a few times to give tutorials on how to use this or explaining this, and it is quite interesting to see them struggle, like how to do this tutorial and how to do this online, and it's quite interesting. It makes classes much more fun.
I think, you young guys, you're going to make all of us obsolete, us dinosaurs that we didn't grow up with this technology. I didn't have a mobile phone until I was 24. They didn't exist. We used to have answering machines, messages. It was a different time. Wow. So anyway, I've diverged a little bit. We'll get back on the main topic. So the reason we've invited you here today is because you are climate strikers and you've all been active in the climate strike movement in Scotland. Tell me how that's working. How are you continuing your climate strikes online, Dylan?
Mostly, we've kind of just seen if anyone wants to join big Zoom calls where we strike, and that's kind of all we've done for striking, since we can't organize anything because we have no idea when it'll be safe, and we don't want to say it'll be safe on a certain date if it's not going to be. But we have kind of started to do more other kind of things that'll help us later on. So we're kind of starting to do a project with England where it's called Teach the Future. So they started it off, but they're helping us set up now, which is good, so we can get the kind of manual stuff done first before we need to do the physical activism. And we're also talking about like campaign strategies and stuff and ways we can be kind of better after lockdown. So we haven't done much in the way of actually striking because it's not the most effective way to push for climate change, no, climate action rather, during this time. So yeah, sorry if my voice sounds off, I'm not very well.
How are you getting on, Holly? With the online climate striking?
As Dylan says, not a lot has been happening, but I've mainly just been like doing other stuff with environmental groups. So I've been like doing some stuff SYCS, but I've been less active there because I am trying to take a break. I haven't had a break really since I started striking a year ago. But and I'm also getting involved with not getting involved, but doing stuff for other groups that I was involved with before. So it's mainly just keeping everything going, but not actually doing a lot in a way.
Josie, how are you getting on?
I found it with the same as Holly, basically. I've been keeping everything going, keeping tabs on everything, but not actually doing a lot strike-wise. I've been like checking all that I'm doing at home and making sure I'm not contributing to the climate crisis more than I can, obviously. But like, as long as it's just basically not had much of a chance to do anything because the online system is quite hard to get your voice heard because there's so many other things going on amidst the whole crisis that though climate is always a concern, it's fallen to the back of people's minds because we're in the middle of a pandemic. So yeah.
And I worry that it wasn't at the front of people's minds before, although I credit the climate strike movement for bringing climate mainstream. You know, in the green movement, we've been talking about climate for 30 years and it never went mainstream. It was always considered this sort of radical side thing. And now you guys and your hard work of your movement has made this mainstream. You've hit the news in a way that we never achieved, which is, it's great, frustrating for us, but great for you, great for you guys. So I think your movement has had a huge impact. I think it does make a difference and continue to make a difference. But I share your frustration with not being able to get out and do normal campaigning activities for a political party. That's things like knocking on doors and speaking to voters, which of course we absolutely cannot do. And among the problems that we've got is that moving online costs money. And, the Conservative Party, they have millions and millions of pounds, mostly from tax dodgers, which they can spend. The Panama Papers was a who's who of Tory donors that they can spend on buying television advertisements and stuff. For the party like the Greens, we don't have that money. So as you say, it's very hard to be heard online. So this is something that we're all going to have to work on and get better at because we have to be heard. It's going to be such a challenge. So I'd like to hear from you guys. What inspires you to keep fighting for climate action? Holly, what inspires you?
I think several things really. It's other young people who like Josie and Dylan, who I just love working alongside. And it's also the environment, for a less alienating term, the living world, which I've grown up with all my life, and I just do a lot of my activism to protect nature and to restore it in many areas, and also like how the world could be better. So as you were saying, how we could change and go towards that better world, because I found that a lot of environmentalism is about how we can avoid a terrible future when we should be saying join us and we can make a fantastic one. And yeah, I think it's the knowledge that the world could be so much better, and I want to be part of that fight to making that world.
That's. I want to come back to some of your points. You've made some excellent points, but we'll let the others have a go. Josie, what is your thoughts on that?
What I
What
found is
inspires
that
you?
one of the main things that inspires me is the thought of the people in the future who are going to have to face the problems that the current generations are creating now, and that we could prevent them having to do the same thing that we're doing. And the other thing is that I always grew up going to my grandparents' house who live in the countryside, and them showing me nature and showing me wildlife. And I don't want people my age in the future to have that taken away from them, because it was such a huge part of my life growing up, seeing all the birds, showing how to respect nature, how to respect the environment, and to an extent respect other people. So to have that taken away, I just don't want that to happen. I want to keep that part of my childhood going.
That's beautiful. I love that imagery of the sort of the birds and the sort of nature as it should be. Dylan, what inspires you?
I've never really quite felt inspired to do anything, because I see it as kind of, I don't feel like I have a choice, because I feel like it's the morally right thing to do if you understand the situation, that you would obviously fight against it. Because the more I read up on what was happening and how many people were going to be affected by this of losing their homes, I was like, I'm in a position where I can affect that, so I should. Yeah, so it's not necessarily inspiration, if that makes sense. It's more of it's kind of like an anger sense that we haven't done it before, and that people are being affected right now, and billions will be affected in the future if we don't do something right now. So it kind of feels like an obvious thing to do, if that makes sense. Like, it's obvious as going to school.
I mean, that makes complete sense. Saving the world is not optional. And I don't understand myself why so many people seem to think it is. Like, oh, well, we have to make choices. Like, no. Saving the world is not optional. At 6 degrees of warming, 95% of life on Earth is dead. Coronavirus is very dangerous, and it kills, 1% of the people that kill it. 95% of life on Earth, not just humans, but all life on Earth will be dead at 6 degrees of warming. And we are currently heading for north of 6 degrees of warming. If we keep on at the growth rates that we're going, increase of emissions as they have been going, if that continues, we'll be at 7 or 8 degrees. That is a wipeout of what our living world is. I think Holly's language there is really good. That's a wipeout of our living world. And it really stresses me out and frustrates me that isn't considered an emergency. So we've had governments and local councils all over Scotland say, oh, yes, climate emergency. Yes, let's have a nice vote. We agree. There's a climate emergency. And then do nothing. I mean, really nothing, a whole lot of nothing. Then we have the coronavirus emergency. And suddenly we see what emergency looks like. Suddenly we see people being told to stay at home. We see working remotely become mandatory. We see people changing their habits. Oh, look, cycling. Suddenly that's a great idea, not just a crazy green thing. All these things. Oh, wait, maybe we should make more room for people in cities and less for cars. Whoa, crazy ideas, And so it's been frustrating for me to see what an emergency response really looks like. And certainly as a politician, I want to go back to all those governments and say, okay, that was an emergency response. Let's see your emergency response to climate. How has that made you guys all feel? Holly, how has that made you feel?
Really hopeful, I think, because people are definitely, before I think people were saying how we can't act quickly enough, and we didn't really know, how we could act. But we have seen with coronavirus that politicians can act really, really fast. I mean, we've locked down entire countries within days. And so I think we've seen how, we can see something and respond to it when we don't get paralyzed by fear, as some people talk about the climate crisis, and we can act really fast, and we can save lives by responding to an emergency. So it's made me feel really hopeful that people also are waking up to how we should be acting towards the climate crisis and realizing that we can act. We're just not choosing not to.
Dylan, how's all that made you feel?
Yeah, it's kind of seems like people are starting to understand what a crisis is, because before it was much easier to just continue doing everything, and change was really scary. But, you know, we've changed, and yeah, it's a really bad situation. But for the average person, it's kind of worth the sacrifice for lives. So if we can somehow change the tone to relate what people went through in coronavirus to climate change, I think we do have a chance of kind of changing and turning things around. I don't know how much I trust the current governments to do it, but yeah, they might do it. I think it's more likely than it was. Every kind of time slot we get, it gets slightly more likely, and hopefully it actually happens.
Josie, how do you feel about the differences in the way the governments are treating the two emergencies?
It really frustrates me a lot because they've branded climate as an emergency. They've said, this is a climate emergency. They've proceeded to do virtually nothing in regards to the climate emergency. And as you said, coronavirus comes, it's an emergency. They brand it as an emergency, and then suddenly everyone springs into action. The climate change, this is a strange analogy, but it's like a global pandemic, but for the Earth. If climate change gets too much, we will all die. It's a huge, like, I don't understand why climate is so different, because the climate is just something, it's more of a silent killer, but it's there. You can see all the effects, you can see the science, you can see all the reasoning behind why the climate is so important. And when it's called an emergency, everyone decides to ignore it because, oh, we'll leave it for someone else. It's not our problem. And I don't understand why people are treating it that way. Like, I just don't get it.
So I think that brings us neatly to something that Holly mentioned before, which I want to come back to, which was about the future and what the future is going to be like. Because something that journalists are always trying to sort of trick me into doing when they ask me questions, they always sort of, you know, lean in and say, well, you know, a green future is going to be pretty awful, isn't it? You know, it's going to be, we can't fly in planes, we can't eat meat, it's going to be gruesome, the economy is going to fall apart. And of course, I don't believe that at all. I don't think that is what a green future is about. I think a green future is there's more space for cycling. We work a 4-day week. So we're not working crazy hours to buy crap from wish.com that we don't need. We work fewer hours. We spend more time making things with our hands. We make sure that things can be repaired instead of having to buy new ones when they break. We spend more time with the people who matter to us. We take our times getting places. We don't have to zoom around on airplanes. We can get there by bicycle or we can get there by train. We're not in this sort of terrible, frantic rush. Everything about that speaks to me about a better quality of life. And for generations that came before me, and I think your guys' generation is a little bit different, but from before me, they matched quality of life entirely with how much crap they could buy. And like, how big is your house? How many cars? Do you have a second home? How many holidays do you take? That for them is a measure of quality of life. But I think young people see it differently and see quality of life as being about doing meaningful work, not necessarily flashy, you know, high paid work, but something where they know they're making a benefit. Buying things that will last, that they can repair, taking pride in making things with their hands, and knowing that quality time is time spent with friends, not time spent buying crap or working unpaid overtime or that kind of nonsense. So I'm interested in, I'll go around to each of you and get you to tell me what you would look forward to in a fantastic future. What does a green fantastic future look like? If we do make the changes that we want to make, how is the future going to be fantastic? Josie, I'll come to you first.
I think on the note where you said quality time, I think quality time will be better in the future because I'll get to spend more time with my friends, which I'm really struggling with at the moment because I'm missing out on all the things that I'd be doing growing up. So I'm looking forward to in the future, and in a green future, when we have more time to be together and more time for me, like, hey, do you want to, we can go out, we can go to, for an example, a really random example, in the green future, I would have much nicer outdoor spaces. So I can do more things outdoors with my friends, because whenever we want to do something outdoors, we end up having to go into their like we'll go to a park which doesn't have much space, and because it's the one nice day of the year in Scotland, everyone's decided to go, so it's really crowded and there's just nothing there. So I want there to be somewhere where I can spend time with my friends and make memories that otherwise we're not going to get a chance to make.
That's beautiful. I love that. That's such a good answer. Dylan, what do you think? What's a fantastic green future for you?
I think not valuing people by their ability to work is a huge problem we have right now. So kind of our entire systems and everything revolves around making sure people are working. Doesn't necessarily matter if they enjoy it, as long as they're working. And I think that's a really big problem, because we have this whole idea of if you're not being productive, then you're failing and you're lazy and you're a mess. And I'm not sure how we would get there, but my ideal world would kind of be, you know, more attention to having experiences, which I think has actually been proven something young people are more interested in than having things. Yeah, and just not feeling guilty for going anywhere, because I would love to go see other places. And then I'm very, very, very aware of how much carbon is emitted, even from trains. It's just a world where maybe young people don't feel a need to skip school every week to be heard would be nice. But yeah, there's a lot of things that go into it. But I think one of our main problems is our culture around working.
That's brilliant. Really good answer. Excellent. Holly, the bar has been set pretty high. What does your fantastic green future have in it?
I think for me, it's about being fulfilled, because right now, I don't think people get a lot out of life. They spend several years of their life in school, which is all about exams. Then they come out of school, like having learned nothing like of real importance. And then they go straight into work. They work for several decades, and then they go into retirement, which will probably only last a few years. And like, there's nothing about, as Dylan said, experiences and feeling fulfilled and feeling part of a community where you are valued and where you can, where you have your place and where you feel like you belong. Because right now, I think everyone is so alienated from each other. And we have like a real pandemic of loneliness. Like, people are not connected to one another, even though we have things like social media. They probably know more about people across the globe than they know about their own neighbors. And so I think we really need to work on, we need to be able to be fulfilled and to, be part of a community that really does value each other and where you can be part of.
Those were some seriously good answers. I definitely want to live in your guys' green, fantastic futures. I'm so glad that we're all on the same team working toward that future, because that definitely sounds like a future I'd like to live in. Now I'm going to change the topic a little bit. So one of the nice things about the live broadcast is that we get people sending in messages over social media and asking questions. So I'm going to go to a few live questions at the moment that have come in over social media while we've been talking and before we started. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a question. I'm going to pick one of you to just give me some thoughts on it. And if your thoughts on it are, I don't have an opinion or I don't know, that's fine. If your thoughts are, you just want to, like, maybe you have an example or a story related, that's cool as well. And I'll then give my thoughts and then we'll move to the next one. So this is going to be sort of rapid fire to rattle through these questions. So the first question that we've got in is from Robert, and he would like to ask how we build public confidence in returning to public transport journeys and commuting as the lockdown is eased. Josie, do you have any ideas about that?
I think they need to make public transport have much more strict things enforced with social distancing and easier ways to pay or get onto the bus without having to have contact. So it's much easier to, say, for buses, for an example, it's much easier for you to get on, don't need to go within 2 meters of people, pay quickly, sit somewhere or stand somewhere without having to touch anyone or touch anything, and then get off the bus quickly.
Right, you've given a much better answer than I could. My answer was going to be something much lamer, but I actually, because I sew, that's something that I do. So I've made a whole bunch of masks recently. One of my feelings is that I think mask wearing is going to become the norm on things like buses. So on days when I'm too lazy to walk or I'm wearing stupid shoes, I take the bus to work, and often you're packed cheek to jowl. And I suspect that a part of living with this virus, but still being able to work, is that in future we will we will wear masks. Hopefully, once the governments get a good testing and tracing policy in place, we won't all be in immediate danger, but we all will need to keep up that aspect of reducing the spread, just, you know, just in case we get infected. So
one thing,
carry on.
One very quick thing is that the bus that I would take to school usually is always at 8 o'clock in the morning, 7:30 in the morning, completely packed. My sister has her cello, I have my viola, there's standing, and the bus drivers always let on more people than allowed. You're meant to have, say, I think it depends on each bus, but let's use 12. You're meant to have 12 people standing. They'll have 20 people standing, all the seats filled, and that just can't happen in the future, I don't think, because there's no way that that's going to be safe with the amount. Yeah, it just won't be safe in the future that we're going to have in the next months and years, probably.
So part of the answer to that is to reduce overcrowding by properly planned public services. Yeah, I go through to Glasgow on the train, and some of those Glasgow to Edinburgh trains are rammed, particularly the last one before the high fees come in at 4:30 on a weekday afternoon. And what's even worse is that some days they don't have the right length of train, so you get a 3-carriage train. So you've got all the people you'd normally have on a 6 or 8 carriage train rammed into 3. So better planning, but I think that comes to better funding of public services and actually taking things like the trains back into public service, so they're not being run for profit, which means, of course, that companies cut corners wherever they can to maximize their profit. They're not focusing on customer service and getting people places. They just try to make money. It's a big problem with having things in privately run that should be public service. Okay, next question has come in from Claire. And Claire says, if you could set one piece of homeschooling homework reading during lockdown for Scottish MSPs and UK Parliament MPs, what would you choose? So what would you choose as homework for our government politicians, Holly, if they had to read something?
I would think maybe Extinction Rebellion's handbook, because I really enjoyed reading that, and I think there's a lot in it that MSPs could take from it. Or I'm going to put 2 out here. Or maybe no, I think I'll just stick with the Extinction Rebellion handbook.
That's an excellent suggestion. My suggestion was going to be the IPCC report on climate change. It's a couple of years old now. That was the one that originally said we had 12 years left. That means we have 10 now, or whatever the countdown is. I was lucky enough to get to read some of that out loud as part of a Fringe performance, and it is terrifying. Don't read it before bedtime, but every single politician in the world should read it. And in fact, everyone should read it. People who argue with me about how important it is for them to be able to fly on their holidays should definitely read this, because it is proper terrifying stuff. Right, excellent. Next question. Jean says, I left school 65 years ago, and I don't know if this is the place to put the question, but I'd like to know why the Scottish Government is allowing SEPA to relax safety provisions to help the economy. So that is one of these contradictions that we've spoken about a little bit, where when you're trying to rebuild an economy, you can either go 2 ways with it. You can go the green way, where you're going to build a new, greener future, or you can go the other way, which is deregulate, cut taxes, but also cut wages for nurses and fire people and all the sort of people who work in the public sector. So you can either double down on austerity, or you can build a new future. So I think that's kind of the root of this question, because SEPA is a government body. What do you think, Dylan, about that? How do we deal with the fact that it looks like in some cases the government's going in the right direction we don't think they should be going?
Well, that's quite a tricky question. I haven't thought about that much at the moment. I'm not entirely sure what it means either. Is it like an economy that prioritizes money over people?
Well, that's it. So in this case, it looks like the economy is relaxing safety. So SEPA is the body which deals with things like pollution and like oil spills or the Mossmoran plant flaring. So if you're a chemical company and you accidentally dump a bunch of chemical on a field or in a river, you have to report to SEPA, and they will decide whether you've committed a crime, whether you have to pay for the cleanup. They sort that out. Now, for a long time, it's been considered, at least by people who I know in business side, I don't know about the politics side, that SEPA is very toothless, that SEPA doesn't really either have the powers or choose to use them to really crack down on big polluters. So here's an example that Jean has brought up, where apparently SEPA is relaxing safety provisions, so allowing more pollution in order to help the economy. I don't know, what do you think about that?
It seems like a classic case of profit over people, not just people, but also wildlife. I think one of our massive problems is we don't actually understand how much we rely on wildlife, whether it's in the ocean or the air or wherever it is. We rely on it, we need it. We've kind of started to treat that as a resource that's expendable, which is where you start to come into money's the most important thing. And I don't know, maybe better education in schools would help with that, but I think it's definitely not good to not be cracking down on those kind of oil spills and stuff, because if they feel like it's okay to get away with that, then they'll just keep doing it more. And while they're bad while functioning as well, they're much worse when they're also having oil spills and stuff like that. So
it seems very short term to me as well, to allow more pollution, to relax safety, to boost the economy, when you're just going to have to pay more money later to clean up the mess later. It's one of these things, like if you don't invest in deprived communities, you end up with a lot of crime and a lot of mental and physical health problems later on. If you'd have just invested in the first place in proper community care, in proper education and support for families locally, you wouldn't have to pay those massive costs down the line. So much of what is mainstream neoliberal economic thinking is actually just really short-term thinking that assumes someone else will pay the price 20 years down the line. And I think that that's a lot of our problems environmentally as well. And I really like Holly's term about the living world. I think that's a lot of problems with how politicians treat the living world, because they want to look good in the next 5 years, and 50 years away is too long away for them. They won't be alive in 50 years, but you guys will be. So keep at it. Keep on those politicians, because it does matter. 50 years is going to be within your lifetime. I'll probably be gone by that point. I'll be very, very old. But you guys will still be, active citizens. So this is going to matter to you guys. Good answers. Okay, last one of the questions that's come in before we started, and then I've got a few that have come in while we've been going. So Doris says, the people of Loch Lomond know what they need to improve the beauty of the countryside where they live, and they have their own plans to improve tourism and still keep the beauty of Loch Lomond. So this is more of a comment really than a question, and it looks like it's a comment on how local people can affect their local environment, and an argument for communities having a say. So maybe, as this is our last one, I'll actually go around to all of you. So one of the principles of the Green Movement that we feel very strongly in is that the Green Movement should be local. It's no good someone in Edinburgh or someone in London telling people all over the country, this is how you will be green, when actually communities know for themselves what's best. In my experience, if you give people the power to make choices for themselves and their communities, they will always choose the greener solution, because people like to be fair to their neighbours. The UK government says, okay, we're going to frack under some towns in the north of England. They're not fracking under their own houses, are they? It's always much easier to abuse people that you don't know. But in your own community, people like to be fair. They like to have clean air. They like to have lovely green spaces and public spaces and waterfront. So if you let local communities have the say, they will always make better choices. That's one of my abiding beliefs. Holly, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, so we should definitely allow communities to decide for themselves what they're going to do and what's best for them. Because, it's also going to create lots of tension with the government coming in and saying, we're going to do this to you, and we don't care what you think. Like, a lot of this happens in Fort William as well. So a lot of the decisions about Fort William are made in Inverness, and Fort William people don't get a say in that. So it's definitely something that needs to change, and communities need to have a say in what happens to their town or their village.
Dylan, what do you think about that?
I agree on the idea that communities should decide, but I think we're very flawed in how we define what the community is. Because, for example, in West Lothian, I have friends that live literally about 40 minutes away, 45 minutes away, and there's no way they're in the same community as me, but they're in the same council area. And the council buildings themselves are an hour away on the bus. So it's not really my community when I get there, and they're not going to be able to understand what my town needs compared to Livingston, compared to Fauldhouse, compared to all these other places. So I think one problem is we should probably divide up local communities more to understand that further, because I have had problems before with my council kind of ignoring my town. But yeah, I think overall communities should have a much bigger influence on green things, like insulating public buildings. That should be the job of the council, but they're not necessarily doing it. But I don't like the idea that someone in Edinburgh is going to know exactly how to handle everything in Scotland for all communities.
And Josie, what are your thoughts?
A small thing I thought is that people are going to be far less receptive to taking the green option if they're being told to do it by someone who lives somewhere really far away from them and who it's not going to affect. Because if somebody says, like, to my community, okay, you need to do this, this, and this, but if they lived in Glasgow and they tried to tell my small area in Edinburgh what to do, people were going to be far less receptive because it's not coming from someone near them. And if people work together as a community to do it, they'll feel like it's a much more supportive environment if you're working together on something rather than having one person who lives 100 miles away from you telling you to do this, this, and this. Like, it's not helpful at all. Like, you need that grouping to support you, I feel.
You guys make an excellent case, far better than I've ever made, for smaller councils all over Scotland. A really good case for that, and less centralisation in how decision making is made, both of which are very good green values. Absolutely on board with that. So we're just going to start wrapping up here. Thank you guys. I think you guys are amazing. You've given some really good in-depth answers. And the last few things that have come in online are not actually questions. They're just nice things that people wanted to say to you. Trumpeter6 says, I just want to say a big thank you to the young people for their activism. You are my hope and inspiration for the future. Carol says, we have benefited in Linlithgow having no traffic, many more people cycling and less pollution. It would be good if it stayed that way. Yes, it would. Julie says, keep up the good work, guys. I wish there was a car club car on every street to get people used to sharing expensive resources that don't need to be used all the time. James, who's 81 years old and watching us, says, I like the quote that society is well when an old man plants a tree knowing he will never sit in its shade. Absolutely. So people like me need to work to protect the living world so that you guys and your kids and grandkids can have a planet to live on. Isla Scott from Devest, Strathclyde and Glasgow calls out polluters here. Good work, Isla. Excellent. And the last one is, again, from Trumpeter6, who says, as a former Girl Guide leader, I know that some of the best times are spent with friends around a campfire, singing and toasting marshmallows. Priceless. That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, guys, and keep up the good work. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon.